to our preview of the Rose Bowl between number 1 Michigan and number 4 Alabama, which is at 5 p.m. on New Year's Day on ESPN Eastern Time. Dalton, let's start off when Michigan has the ball. What are you looking forward to seeing most with J.J. McCarthy against that elite Alabama defense?
I think it's just can he overcome the challenge? Look, I think we both believe that Alabama's the best secondary in the country.
Yeah.
There's some arguments maybe with a team like Iowa, but Bama, considering what they have to face every week and just these star-studded talent, like Kool-Aid McKinstry, Terrion Arnold, Caleb Downs, just an unbelievably talented group that really has been the best part of their team most consistently all year. I mean, the only subpar game they played was the Texas game back in week 2, which, obviously put their season in danger. But since then, they are just lights out. They don't give up explosive plays, nothing over the top. They tackle well. It's the best secondary in the country. Without question. I think we've known this for probably at least a month and a half, but every week they show up and they're just lights out. And I think when it comes to McCarthy, I'm not sure that we know he can handle that challenge yet. I'm going to throw some splits at you that to me are a little bit troubling. Okay, so you're talking about his grades are heavily weighted by 4, call them easier games. I'm going to throw the 4 at you. East Carolina, UNLV, Purdue, and Michigan State. Okay, East Carolina is honestly one of the 5 worst teams in the country. They went 2-10 this year. And the other 3 teams I just mentioned are all in the bottom 11 currently in coverage grade. Okay, they can't cover anybody, let alone Michigan, right? Again, in those 4 games, a 94.6 passing grade for McCarthy with 11 big-time throws and no turnover-worthy plays, right? Pretty much perfect football against the 4 worst teams on his schedule, at least coverage-wise, right? The other 9 games, which are varying degrees of tough, right? You have Iowa, you have Penn State, you have Ohio State, you have Minnesota. There's some good defenses in there, right? A 64.9 passing grade with 7 big-time throws and 10 turnover-worthy plays, right? Wow. Red zone interceptions against Maryland. The Iowa game, honestly, Michigan's 2 touchdown drives were of 5 and 6 yards. They didn't move the ball great against Iowa. Their last 5 games, actually, let me go to McCarthy's last 4 games of the season. Only a 61.9 passing grade with 1 touchdown. The passing game, the pass protection, it's a lot of it's just stalled. And I think this is starting for me to become a theme with McCarthy. The teams that they're just clearly better than, he's gonna dominate them. But even in the Ohio State game, he had his 2 big time throws and did not much else. Now, were those 2 throws maybe the difference in the game? Sure, but McCarthy is not. I don't think, to me at least lately, he's been as dominant as people think. And if you're gonna beat this Alabama team, you need to be special. There are people who think J.J. McCarthy is a special quarterback, and he just might be on his way. But I don't think we've seen it. I just don't think – I don't think they have a ton of receivers. Like Roman Wilson's really good. Cornelius Johnson's solid. But we just haven't seen enough in this Michigan passing game lately that, for them to dominate, right? Like teams like Penn State. Teams like Ohio State, and the pass protection too in those 2 games has been subpar. It just has. I mentioned to you a couple of weeks ago when they played Penn State, they started to run the ball every single play. To be honest, because they just couldn't block them. They couldn't pass protect. And if you can't pass protect, then everything gets harder. And I think McCarthy right now, their best weapon, other than obviously the run game, which we'll get into, is McCarthy on the move. Not him sitting back there slinging it, because again, he's only got 1 touchdown his last 4 games. It's a huge challenge, I think, for Michigan and McCarthy in this game through the air.
Yeah, I think it is too, and I think that's the big matchup of this game is just whether or not Michigan will be one-dimensional. I remember that Penn State game when they beat them by 9 points. That was a close game the entire second half, and yet he didn't attempt a single pass in the second half. He had 8 pass attempts total in that game, so they were able to kind of not say hide him because he is a talented player, but they were able to just rely on the run game. I don't think you're going to be able to do that against Alabama, who has a really good run defense. Now, Penn State does as well, but I just don't think you could be one-dimensional against the Crimson Tide. And, the Wolverines have kind of been relying on that run game. They run the ball on 56% of their plays, which is the 5th highest rate in the Power 5 this season. So, like you said, man, he's kind of played. Alabama's an elite defense, and you mentioned those elite defenses he's played. In the 3 top 5 graded defenses that he's played in Iowa, Penn State, and Ohio State, he has a 69.7 grade. So, like you said, Alabama, probably the best secondary in the country, best coverage unit in the country as well. 3 Alabama players in that secondary were named to our All-American team, and Caleb Downs and Kool-Aid McKinstry and Terrion Arnold. I really struggle to see if JJ McCarthy can really put the team on his back. And I think he's going to have to do that a little bit in this game, because I just don't know if you can rely on Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, that offensive line, to carry you in this game against Alabama, like they tried to do against Georgia a couple years ago. And we all saw how that turned out as well. So I just really don't know if Michigan can do that in this game. And Alabama is 6th in run defense grade this year. So do you ultimately think that, Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards can get it going enough that they can kind of rely on McCarthy as a secondary option? Or do you think that, hey, McCarthy is going to have to be the driving force of the offense in this game?
I think there's a way to do it. So there's Alabama, there's 6 in run D grade, but like there's a way to get after them. You have to, the one thing that I think is good for Michigan is they're going to have to go right downhill. Okay. Mm-hmm. So Alabama, when you get off tackle or to the edges, is they're actually the 3rd best run D in the country. Between the tackles, that drops to 30th, right? You need to punch them square in the mouth. Their defensive tackles, their linebackers, not as good as it's been in past years. I think there's 2 things that are going to bother Bama. Run right at them, right downhill, and you need an element of quarterback run game. I was a little surprised. If you take out kneel downs, Max, JJ McCarthy has 24 designed runs this whole season.
Wow,
that's it. And I believe 6 of them were in the Penn State game. That's it. 24 design, 2, not even 2 per game. Right? Yeah. It feels like now the scrambling is an element. He's lethal when he moves to his right, but that I think has to get added in here, at least, if nothing else, the zone read game or some sort of read option game with McCarthy. Quarterback, it's the same thing we've talked about with Georgia a lot this year. Bama's the same way. It's the same defense. Quarterback run game is a big difference, right? Mm-hmm. It bothered him in the Tennessee game. It bothered him in the Auburn game. Pure pocket quarterbacks, pretty much, they almost don't stand a chance against this defense. They just don't. You saw it with Carson Beck. There's just not. That's the one thing that's not in Carson Beck's game, is he's not an elite athlete. And they held him to 24 points, right? Jaden Daniels had a 90, I think it was a 90 or 91 rushing grade against mm-hmm. Bama. That was the biggest element that caused Bama problems, not the throwing. He made a couple big throws, but his passing grade was in the 70s. It was his feet. Quarterback run game is huge, okay? And I think if Michigan can add some things with the threat of McCarthy on the edge, crashing down on the runs between the tackles, I think there is a formula here for Michigan's run game to succeed. Are they going to pop off a ton of big runs? No, they're not. I don't think so. Maybe Edwards gets loose once, but I think it's going to look similar if they succeed to the Penn State game, to the Ohio State game, where their offensive line has to be the best unit on the field. And my only problem with that is this is not the week that, they lost Zach Zinter in the Ohio State game. That. Yeah. And he's their best run blocker. This is not the game that you want to be missing maybe your best offensive lineman. But look, they've been rotating guys in all year. There's like 8 or 9 guys who've got legitimate snaps. Mm-hmm. They need to run it right down Alabama's throat. Their defensive tackles are 47th in run D. Their linebackers are 39th. Are they awful? No, but this is the weak spot, right? Because to be honest, the secondary help that they get, Arnold and Downs, especially in run D, is elite. Obviously, you've got Turner and Braswell on the edge. We'll get into that in a minute, too. Run right down their throat. And, yeah, I to be honest with you, for as one-dimensional as it sounds, I think it's more to me. I would rather, if I'm Michigan, be one-dimensional, leaning towards the run game than I am to the pass game. If they get, it's a game script game. They get behind early, drop back, McCarthy just 3-step drop trying to find it. That's even worse. I would much rather, if they're going to be one-dimensional, run it down their throat. And if they added anything with McCarthy's feet by design, I think it'd be a huge help.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're looking at the receivers. I mean, if you get one-dimensional the pass game, they have answers for everything for you. So Kool-Aid McKinstry could take away Roman Wilson, or Terry Ark will do that as well. Cornelius Johnson will be taken away by the other corner. And then you got Malachi Moore. We even mentioned it. He's a really, really good slot corner kind of hybrid that they use as well. Caleb Downs can cover Colston Loveland, the tight end that they love, who I think is a very talented tight end, but he could be taken away by those safeties as well. Jalen Key has been a really good safety for Alabama. So it's almost like they have answers for everything in the passing game. And the other thing that they have answers for is that Michigan's offensive line, who won the last two Joe Moore Award winners as the best offensive line in the country, kind of took a step back this year. And one of the big reasons for that was not the interior. It was the offensive tackles who have really, that's been kind of the weakness of the offensive line. And again, that does not match up well with Alabama, who you can make an argument might have the best edge duo in college football in Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell. Turner going to be a first-round pick. Chris Braswell, I know, has been kind of shooting up draft boards a lot right now. That's going to be an issue for them in this game against Carson Barnhart and against Ladarius Henderson and other guys too. So I'm interested in seeing how those two tackles hold up, not only in the run game, which I don't know if they'll be able to do off-tackle stuff like you said before with Turner and Braswell kind of manning it, but also in pass protection, man, that could be a big issue because if you don't have time for your receivers to get open against the best secondary in college football, that's the only way I think you can really beat them deep is if you have J.J. McCarthy just sitting back there with plenty of time, because then eventually, as good as any secondary will be, they will break down eventually if you give them enough time. I don't know if there's going to be enough time, man, with Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell coming around the edge.
I'm curious to see what Saban has schematically for this because, so you mentioned offensive tackles. I'll throw a stack of numbers at you. For the year, their tackles 86th in the country in pass protection.
Yeah.
Since week 7, that's 109th. All right. And since week 9, it's the 7th worst. Okay. It's gotten worse as they've played better opponents and as the year has gone on. Since that week 7 point, 6th highest pressure rate allowed from their tackles. It's actually just not good. Like I told you, they were not capable of blocking Chop Robinson when they played Penn State. And they really, to be honest with you, McCarthy scrambled or he got rid of the ball. Sawyer and Tuimoloau dominated them against Ohio State. It's not good at all. And when you've got the two guys that led the SEC in pressures, 2 of the 4 best pass rushers in the SEC, it's a problem. Actually, it's funny for me because Turner's getting the first round hype, but I'm looking at Braswell in this game. He's the guy coming off the offense's right side, okay? Mm-hmm. And J.J. McCarthy, when I went back and watched, so he's the 6th best quarterback in the country when he's moved off his spot, okay? Mm-hmm. Really, really good scrambler, really, really good at throwing on the move. But the one thing that happens with McCarthy, if you let him move to his right, you have a major problem. Major, major problem. If you make him step up, or move to his left or back out of the pocket to his left, there's a lot less good things that happen for Michigan. But pretty much, if I'm being honest with you, McCarthy rolling to his right in some fashion is the best play in Michigan's offense.
Yeah.
Big plays. He's just a natural rolling to his right. You know, I even think about how good, say, a guy like Josh Allen, right, is just lethal. When he gets out to his right, good luck. You are asking for a touchdown to happen. I'm curious with Braswell coming off that right side of the offense, and even what Saban might have for stunts or some things to set him up, if they can prevent McCarthy from rolling to his right. It's cool to get pressure, okay? If you win on the outside quick, cool, but he can step up and under. Think like Aaron Rodgers, right?
Yep.
Is there going to be a spy? Is there going to be something looping around, or do they have some answer? If you can make McCarthy get out to the backside, he's not as natural a thrower. It's not as quick. They're just you see bad things start to happen when they make him roll to his left. I don't know if this is something maybe Saban's picked up on or not, but if they have, that's the one thing with JJ. The most dangerous part, more than anything in the pocket, is if you let him get to his right, and that's 75-ish% of the time going to be Chris Braswell's side. Mm-hmm. If you let him get to his right, even with that secondary, you've got a problem because he just laces throws just all over the place when he's working the right side of the field moving, right? I think Chris Braswell in the Alabama's front 7 at least is the most important player. Can he win quick enough, and can he keep McCarthy in the pocket from moving either up and through or even backing around to his right? I think that's going to be a big time part of this game, more so than Dallas Turner, even though Turner's the bigger name of the two of them.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that too. I wonder if Saban's going to tell Brazel like, "Hey, rush the passer, obviously, like don't play contain." But I wonder if there's going to be an element of, "Hey, go for the quarterback as well, but also play a little contain and don't let him get out to the right and let kind of Dallas be the guy that pins his ears back and fully goes after him." Like I wonder if Brazel's going to play it a little safe just so McCarthy doesn't roll out to his right because you mentioned it, the numbers when he rolls out to the right compared to the left and staying in the pocket even is stark. So I think that's a big difference, and I'm glad you brought that up because I think that'll be an interesting part of as how Braswell what his plan is rushing the passer. Let's move over to the other side of the ball too. So as we just mentioned right there, you can see it's an elite defense against a really good offense, but man, Alabama's got a tough defense to go against. It's kind of the same on the other side of the ball, man. Michigan right now, the highest graded defense in college football. And Alabama, as we've seen in the past, not really lately, but in the past, they've had some issues offensively. What are you looking forward to seeing when Alabama has the football against Michigan's elite defense?
I think like it's kind of weird because Alabama's run game is very straightforward, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's a lot of man blocking. They get right downhill. There's the read threat of Milrow. I think for me, run and pass game. I just don't think Michigan's seen. Well, I don't. I think we know it with all those Big Ten quarterbacks. They have not seen a guy like Jalen Milrow
Yeah.
this year. It's just not. He's, to be honest, right now, he's the second best rushing threat at quarterback behind Jaden Daniels.
Yep.
Okay, absolute rifle. Just a rifle. I think Drake May leads the country in big time throws. And like we see Caleb Williams do improv stuff and Jaden Daniels throws with so much touch. Like nobody throws a better slot fade than Jaden Daniels, right?
Yeah.
But I'm going to be honest, watching through Milrow's tape again, there is not a guy who makes more and better just pure arm strength throws in the country. Like there are so many throws every week where I'm just like, how? Like, how does this ball get there? So, like, I want to see miles per hour measured on some of these throws because it's just crazy the just sheer velocity and power he throws the ball with. And then obviously when he gets vertical, he takes off scrambling. It's a problem. I'm curious what Michigan has for Milrow, right? Because I think the one thing that we knew from the very beginning, even through say the struggles of the first couple games, and then for some reason getting benched against USF, he's a lightning rod, man. He's
Mm-hmm.
just a big play machine. Top of the line in big time throws, 30 explosive runs on the year. I believe it was sixth most out of any quarterback. You just cannot. This guy can score a touchdown on any play from anywhere.
Yep.
It doesn't matter. So first thing I look at is deep ball. He's the second best deep passer since either for the year, for the season behind Jaden Daniels in the country. Second best deep passer in the country. You look at him since week 4, he's the 8th best quarterback in the country. Jalen Milrow is not a weakness. And the crazy thing to me, he's second in yards per attempt. He's got a top 10 average depth of target, right? He just throws the ball way, way downfield, and yet he still completes roughly 2/3, 67% of his passes.
Mm-hmm.
It actually doesn't, the fact that he completes so many passes going for so many big plays almost doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Look, Michigan, here's the thing with Michigan. 68th in the country in coverage grade against a deep ball. You better have it together on the back end.
Yeah.
I'm telling you right now. You have to, because Milrow, he's got this thing. I don't think he's like a master, like cerebral reader of defenses yet. But the one thing he does see is if somebody's got a step behind you, he's going to throw that thing as far as he can. He just has a knack for finding when somebody screws up in the secondary and making them pay for it. 60 yards, boom, gone. Any little mistake with his arm strength, it's a wrap. It really is. So I think the biggest element, this is the best athlete Michigan's seen all year, Jalen Milrow.
Mm-hmm.
Are they like well adjusted enough to handle a guy like that? And I think there's some scheme things. I'm going to let you go first, but I think there's some things they can do. There's a formula here. I think Georgia showed a little bit of it, but that's the challenge for me is how do we not get 60-yard bombs dropped on us? And how do we not get a 40-yard scramble dropped on us?
That's the thing with Jalen Monroe is that it really is kind of a boomer bust in every single play because he is a guy that is going to make unbelievable plays and he's going to make a lot of head scratching ones as well. And, you look at how much he takes sacks, man, and Michigan has a great defensive line. That's another matchup I'm really looking forward to seeing is Michigan's defensive line, who I believe is still right now the highest graded D line in the country. He right now, if you look at PFF Ultimate right now, Jalen Monroe is in the 0th percentile in terms of pressure to sack conversion rate. He takes a sack on almost 11% of his pressures. So he is not a guy that gets rid of the football quickly. I think Michigan could take advantage of that. And I think Michigan has the secondary to match up with Alabama. Now, the deep passing stuff is a problem, but I do think Will Johnson, you put him on Jermaine Burton. You got some really good safeties, Rod Moore as well. Jalen Monroe loves to attack the middle of the field. I think Michigan has a secondary to create problems for Monroe. And Alabama, we mentioned how great their secondary is. Right now, Alabama is second in coverage grade overall for defense in the country. The only one above them is Michigan. Michigan has a really, really good coverage unit all season. And the only time that Alabama's played a team that was in the top 15 of coverage grade all year was the SEC championship game in Georgia. And Georgia was 9th in coverage grade. And in that game, Jalen Monroe actually had the worst passing grade of the season. He had a 50.2 passing grade against Georgia in that SEC title game. So I think, like you mentioned before, the key in this game is going to be for Monroe to utilize his legs. And like you said, he has the second highest rushing grade in the country this year, 87.7, second only to the Heisman Trophy winner, Jaden Daniels, among all quarterbacks in the country. The Wolverines haven't seen that this year, and they haven't allowed a quarterback to rush for 60 yards against them at all this season. In fact, the last time that a quarterback rushed for 60 yards against them was last year's college football playoff semifinal when Max Duggan had 63 yards against them. Also, Max Duggan had 2 rushing touchdowns in that game as well, and it was only a 6-point game. So you can make an argument those 2 rushing touchdowns obviously played a big part in TCU pulling off that upset. I think Jalen Monroe is going to have to do a little bit of that too, because I just don't know. I don't know if the deep stuff will be there in this game. I don't. I think Michigan's secondary is really, really good. I don't love Alabama's. I think Alabama's got a talented group of receivers, but they're not elite like Washington's, which we'll get into in just a second, or even Texas's. I think that the mobility for Jalen Monroe is going to be a big part of this game. But even that, man, Michigan's got the linebackers to spy him. Michael Barrett can spy him. Junior Colson can spy him as well. I don't know. I think this could be a game, man, where you see 2 low-scoring offenses struggle to put points on the board, and then maybe finally someone breaks through at the end. Because I look at this right now, I see 2 elite defenses, 2 of the probably 3 best defenses in college football, going up against some offenses that are really talented and can do a lot of things really good, but they have some issues too. And I think that could be exposed a little bit in this game. Another thing I want to point out, Jalen Monroe, you mentioned outside the pocket stuff with JJ McCarthy. Jalen Monroe's in the 8th percentile outside the pocket. This is a guy who, when he stays in the pocket, when he's not running, he likes to stay in the pocket and be a pure pocket passer, because outside the pocket, he has a 40 passing grade this year. 8th percentile among quarterbacks. So I think if Michigan can get some pressure on him, move him off his spot, and keep a spy on him so he can't run the ball either, that I think is the avenue for Michigan to really bother Monroe and for him to have kind of a bad game like he did against Georgia.
I think there's 2 things. There's 2 ways they can go about it, Michigan. You can either do what Georgia did, and Georgia was using 2 spies, which you don't see that. It was pointed out in the game, 3-man rush, 2 spies. Only 1 explosive run for Monroe in that game, and it was actually a design quarterback power at the end of the game. So not a single explosive scramble in the Georgia game. Now, Georgia, obviously they're elite in the secondary every year, right? Now, I think there's 2 things they showed us. You can either go with like double spy and you can sit back and just wait for him to throw it, or you can speed him up and blitz him.
Yeah,
that's another solution too. You could blitz him. The only thing with Michigan, they don't really blitz at a real high rate. They have a high simulated pressure rate, but that still implies that you're bringing 4 because you're dropping 1 and sending another. So I have a problem with that, with them sending 4. I'm not sure how they'll do it. The one thing I would do that I like that you mentioned, like Will Johnson and company, man coverage.
Yeah.
Man coverage. Man to man, let's go. Any other year against Bama, when you're talking about Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle and all these guys they've had in the past, right? Jerry Jeudy. You would never play man coverage against Alabama. It's crazy. This year you can do it. And Jalen Monroe against man coverage, 51.7 passing grade. I think You can go with the spy approach or you can go with the blitz approach. The one thing I just do not just, even in simulated pressure, they can pick that up. Do not just send four, because Alabama's pass protection too has gotten better as the year has gone on. It has.
Mhm.
It's a lot better than when they started. If you only send four, I don't care what fashion it is, he will hold the ball back there for an hour and he will find a way to kill you.
You will.
It doesn't matter. They need to come up. They need to take one approach or the other. Either blitz him every play, a real blitz, or go with the spy thing like Georgia did. But either way, I do think on the back end, man coverage is a very good answer.
Yeah. I think so too, man. And I think Michael Barrett right now, their star linebacker, 93.4 pass rushing grade on the season. He's been one of the best pass rushing linebackers. I think he'll play a big part in this game. Like I said before, Jalen Monroe, he hangs onto that ball for a long time. And when he gets pressured a good amount of the time, about 1 out of every 9 times, he's going to take a sack. So I think that could be a big part in this game too. Michigan's D-line, Michigan's front seven, which is also really good. I think they can create pressure on Monroe. Alabama's offensive line has gotten better. Don't get me wrong. J.C. Latham has been a stud for them all year at right tackle. Caden Proctor, though, has gotten better. 5-star recruit, top 10 recruit coming out of high school. Their left tackle, still an 18-year-old true freshman, though. So this is a different animal, I think, in Michigan that he's going up against. That could be an issue. So I think Michigan gets pressure on Monroe. He's shown that he can be prone to making a lot of mistakes under pressure and getting him off his spot and getting him outside the pocket while keeping a spy on him. I think Junior Colson, man, the key is for them, it's hard to play spy on Jalen Monroe because of how athletic he is. And most linebackers simply aren't that athletic. Junior Colson is one of those guys I think is that athletic, and he can spy Monroe and kind of run around with him a lot like Edgerrin Cooper did in that Alabama A&M game. He did that very well and was able to get Monroe a few times. That I think Junior Colson can do the same thing. So maybe send Michael Barrett as a pass rusher, have Junior Colson kind of play that spy role. I think that might be an avenue for Michigan's defense to end up, winning this game potentially for them. Ultimately, Dalton, after all that, and after we've seen how defensive heavy both these teams are, which offense will prevail? Which offense will score just enough points to send their team to the national championship?
Oh boy, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. Okay, Max. Not last year. Last year was wild, TCU, all that stuff. We all remember what happened 2 years ago in the Orange Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's coming again.
Wow.
I think there are a whole lot of problems here. I think this is probably the worst matchup that Michigan could have got for this game. I think they would so much rather play Florida State. They would so much rather play Texas or somebody else. This is not. You just look at everything Alabama has. There's an answer for every. It's the best secondary in the country. Turner and Braswell are not the guys Michigan wants to play with their offensive tackles struggling right now. And just JJ McCarthy. Look, I'm not saying he can't be that guy in the league, in college, whatever. But I have not seen anything that suggests to me that he can really threaten this defense through the air. Even against Iowa in the conference title game, they pretty much just ran out routes at the sticks all night, and they only really earned 12 points. Right? Again, their 2 touchdown drives were 5 and 6 yards. This offense has not been on the same level for the last month. Their hope is going to be that low scoring game that you talked about, and I'm talking 16-13, 13-10. I'm talking a similar game like they got into with Penn State. I just don't see. I don't see Saban letting that happen. I think there's so many. I think there's so many problems. And again, you can't simulate Jalen Milroe in practice.
Yeah.
There is nobody in the Big Ten like this. You can talk about, and again, a double spy approach is cool, but now that Saban's already seen it once, maybe they come up with something around it. And then there's the element, to be honest with you, if Alabama does, we haven't mentioned Alabama's run game too much. Huge offensive line, run right downhill at you. I don't have any doubt that Alabama can play with Michigan physically. I just am not. I'm only seeing, honestly, one road Michigan wins this game, and I'm seeing several spots where Alabama's a huge problem for the Wolverines. I think this is a nightmare. I think when Bama got that 4 spot, I can't imagine Michigan fans felt very good about it, and I didn't for them either. I'm taking Alabama 31-13.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, actually,
I think there's just way too many problems at spots that can cause Michigan trouble.
okay. Yeah, you saw that video too when they announced the playoff teams. You saw like the groan of the entire Michigan team when they saw Alabama, not Florida State, at number 4 as well. But
This is not okay for
it's
them. I don't think so. I don't think Turner, Braswell, Milrow, again, Milrow since week 4 is the 8th best quarterback in the country. It's just too, I think it's too much. And I think especially with Bama's defense, I just think it's too much. What I saw especially against Iowa, I was not impressed.
yeah, that's fair. Okay, so I picked Michigan to win the national championship before the season. I don't want to go against that now. So I am actually going to pick Michigan in this game. I'm picking Michigan 24-21. I think their defense is going to cause Milrow a lot of problems. Now, I do think Alabama's going to do the same thing to J.J. McCarthy. They're going to be wrong. But I think we're kind of going to see the ugly of Jalen Milrow a little bit more. And I don't think we're going to see quite that from McCarthy. And I think Michigan's run game can get something going as well. Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards can make a few plays. I don't feel great about it. Don't get me wrong, because I hear you. And I think that Alabama does cause a lot of problems for Michigan offensively.
You want me to put it the best way I can put it, actually?
Please.
And this is gonna get me in hot water. But I don't think Michigan on offense athletically has anything Alabama's afraid of. Anything.
Interesting.
They have seen athletes like this all season.
Yeah.
And honestly, the way McCarthy's played against the better teams on his schedule, is he better than Carson Beck?
No.
He's certainly not better than Jaden Daniels. I mean, I honestly, when I see some of the tape on it, I start to question even if he's better than guys like Jackson Dart, right? Like,
yeah.
And I think about they held Georgia to 24 and LSU to 28 and Ole Miss to 10 and Tennessee they shut out in the second half. Like Joe Milton's a better athlete even than McCarthy. Like, I don't see athletically anything Michigan has that really makes Saban lose sleep at night.
I will say that Georgia game, they got some lucky breaks in that game. Georgia did fumble a few times in their own territory that Alabama took advantage of. And man, that Georgia game kind of opened my eyes on Milrow a little bit, where it was like, man, he faced an elite secondary and he really struggled. I think Michigan's secondary is even better than Georgia's. And I think that could present a big problem for him. And I think Michigan's D-line is a criminally underrated unit as well. I know we talk about Turner and Braswell. Maybe Michigan doesn't have a first-round pick on that D-line like Alabama does. But I think as a unit, man, it has been one of the best in college football. And I think Alabama's offensive line has had its issues. Now, it has gotten better, like we mentioned before, but it has issues. And I think Caden Proctor and that interior could be exposed a little bit in this game. So that's why I'm picking Michigan, man. I'm picking Michigan. Again, I don't feel great about it, but I do think the Wolverines will come out on top. I don't feel as good about it as you obviously feel about Alabama, but I do think Michigan will come out on top. And for the first time ever, Michigan will be playing in a national championship game, because the last time Michigan won the national championship was 1997. That was before the BCS was around. That was back when they were voting on who the national champion is. So this will actually be the first time ever Michigan goes to a national championship game if they beat Alabama.